You're listening to the Back Home Network, presented by Home Field Apparel. And welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most important topics in the world of Indiana basketball. This is our 292nd edition of Assembly Call Radio, and it is our 948th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of May 25th, 2023. I am your host, Jared Morris. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
And Indiana is the national champion.
When it comes down, Indiana will be champion.
Smart takes the shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
Is there any question what this week's banner moment is? This week's banner moment occurred on Wednesday when Indiana announced the return of Calbert Cheaney to the men's basketball staff as the Director of Player Development. Yes, Calbert, who has his own compelling player development story of going from relatively unheralded recruit to National Player of the Year, and who remains the Big Ten's all-time leading scorer 30 years after breaking Glenn Rice's record with a young Jared Morris in the stands at Assembly Hall. He has spent the last 3 years as an assistant coach for the Indiana Pacers with a focus on player development. Prior to that, Calbert worked at IU under Tom Crean from 2011 through 2013. He was the director of basketball operations and also handled some player development duties as well. You will recall those teams went 56-16 across 2 seasons, won a Big Ten title, and spent many weeks ranked number 1, making it the best 2-year stretch Indiana has had since Calbert's final 2 years in Bloomington, actually, which is the last time prior to the 12-13 seasons that Indiana had 2 consecutive seasons with single-digit losses. Yeah, take a deep breath and let that disturbing little factoid sink in. But we are not here to dwell on all of the mediocre basketball that IU has played since Calbert graduated. He is back, so let's focus on the bright side. The last time Indiana was ready to take a major step forward as a program, Calbert arrived to help push the program forward. And as Indiana enters year 3 of the Mike Woodson era with its most talented and athletic roster since the 2016 and 2013 Big Ten championship teams, here Calbert arrives again in hopes of helping to push the program forward. And despite all he achieved during his time at IU, Calbert, like his new head coach, still has unfinished business. He is renowned as the greatest Hoosier ever to never hang a banner. The undisputed next greatest Hoosier to never hang a banner? Mike Woodson. Add in Jordan Hulls and the 3 former players on Indiana's current staff, all of whom reached number 1 in the AP poll at one time in their careers, can claim 5,992 points, 4 Big Ten titles, 15 NCAA tournament wins, 2 Big Ten MVPs, a National Player of the Year award, and long, lucrative professional careers, but no banners. So for all of the athletic authority that Woody, Calbert, and Jordy bring to the halls of assembly, everyone in Indiana's locker room is striving to do what neither they nor anyone else at IU has done since Keith Smart's shot, and that is hang banner number 6. And while no one has ever credited the Director of Player Development as being the difference between winning a title and not winning a title, you won't find one Indiana basketball fan anywhere who doesn't feel more confident in the direction of the program with Calbert and his no-nonsense, player-focused, winning mentality now aboard. Plus, for a program that is clearly trying to brand itself on the recruiting trail as one that can help talented players get to the NBA, it can only help having a former lottery pick who made $30+ million as a player and who worked in the league as a coach recently on the staff. So, welcome home, Calbert. I speak for everyone who followed those early 90s teams closely when I say that hanging banner number 6 will absolutely mean more with you back as part of the program. All right, now let me introduce my co-host this week. Andy and Coach are actually both off, but here with me, he is a senior writer for The Big Lead, the world's most underpaid shot doctor, and a man whose San Diego Padres have fallen 5 games under 500 and 8 games behind the Dodgers, all while the resurgent Chicago White Sox are now only 5.5 games back in their division. I mean, who needs Fernando Tatis Jr. and Manny Machado anyway?
Analyzing players, finding every wrinkle. He hasn't ever hosted, never lifted a finger. He's got all the
Well, let me quickly add just one thing about this.
Dude just interrupted his own jingle.
All right, Ryan, it's Calbert week. You're not allowed to rant, so what would you like to speak about tonight?
First of all, the Padres are now 4 games under 500. Have won 3 of 4. The comeback's on, baby. Comeback is on. And who needs Fernando Tatis? The Padres need Manny Machado. He's injured right now. We desperately need him. Pretty much my rant is I don't know why I'm on this show. It's Calbert Cheaney week. Jared could have done this by himself. He could have talked for 3 hours just by himself. I don't know why I was asked to be here. I think I should be taking the week off too. In fact, I'm out of here, guys. Have a good one. Basically, I'm going to be back.
I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
I'm going to be back around like, yeah, oh, for sure. That's me this week, guys. Just expect it.
All right, let me ask you this, though, for real. What is your favorite Calbert Cheaney memory? Do you have like a specific memory of him? Or just generally?
I don't have specific memories of. I did watch him break the record, the scoring record. I think that was a nationally televised game, or at least I was watching it somehow. He was on the team that beat Shaq, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's
LSU in 92.
I watched that entire game. And I did watch that live, and I knew he was on that team, but I wanted to make sure before I sat and give a soliloquy on it. But I remember being everyone was super excited about Shaq and nationally. I always liked Indiana. Whenever they'd be on, I could watch them. I watched a bunch of Indiana Kentucky games over the years and everything. I liked Kentucky shorts, but I wasn't a Kentucky fan. That they had the big like scratch shorts. I don't know. Every kid I knew loved those. But I really liked Indiana, and everybody was super excited about Shaq. People were talking about him in my elementary school just because he was so unique and different. I loved Shaq, but watching that game, I actually rooted for Indiana because I loved the way they played. And Calbert, of course, played great in that game. And, they were billing it as kind of those two guys against each other. And so I very vividly remember sitting in my living room watching that game and just loving the way Calbert played. And that, I was Indiana seated above them in that game. It felt like they were the underdog based on the way everyone was talking about Shaq. Yeah. But they won and played very well. And actually when we did, in the COVID year where we didn't have the tournament, we did that game as a rewatch and I was on it. And it was one of the games I'd actually seen before that we did. It was really funny that I got picked for that one. I was like, I've done this one before. So that is my most distinct Calbert memory, being from Southern California and not being able to watch him all the time like you guys or go to games or anything like that. I do remember that game. I remember that was a big national game with a lot of buzz behind it, and they won, and he, of course, was the star.
And Bob Knight and Dale Brown, I mean, such good friends, No rivalry there. Didn't Shaq go like 14 for 15 from the line that game?
Yeah.
It was something ridiculous.
I mean, it was one of those games where like that, I think that game, even in a loss, basically solidified everybody thinking, I mean, he was supposed to be the number 1 pick already. I do remember a conversation from the rewatch. The one thing that was new, and you get reminded of things that, in a game, because I was, 12 when that happened, or 11. I do remember, I think it was Walton was doing the game, and maybe it was Walton. I don't remember, but whoever the color guy was, they asked him, should he return to school? And they're like, yes, he'll get better. It'll be like, there's nothing more valuable than an extra year of school. And I'm thinking the kid was 290 pounds at like 7'3" back then. All you can do is get injured. Like there's
He's as sure thing of a prospect outside of LeBron. I even think Shaq was a more sure thing of a prospect than Wembanyama, personally.
Yeah, maybe. And especially with the way the game was played then. Yeah. Now he wouldn't be, I don't think, just because, well, he can't shoot free throws. He can't shoot anything beyond 5 feet.
Yeah, but if Shaq came up now, he'd probably be a totally different player. I mean,
absolutely. I mean, he actually could dribble in the open floor. And you remember the thing about him when he was young, I know this is the Calbert show when we're talking about Shaq, but the thing about Shaq when he was younger was how insanely athletic he was. I think a lot of people remember the old years where he had been hurt and he was kind of like 340 pounds, 330 pounds, still dominant, but like kind of broke.
Watch the Orlando film, man.
He would run the floor like a gazelle. And, I mean, honestly, he was a lot like the way LeBron played when he came in. People at LeBron's size didn't play the way LeBron did. I mean, Magic Johnson was the only guy who ran the floor like LeBron did at 6'9", at 6'8" or whatever. And so he was a unicorn when he came out. And I think you watch Blue Chips, and I know it's a movie, but the way he played in that, just completely dominant, the vertical he had, all that, that was all real. I mean, that was all absolutely real. He was a superhero when he came in the league. And you're right. I think that, when people saw Zion for the first time, the player he reminded me of was Shaquille. I mean, he's shorter, he's not as big, but the way he played, just bullying guys and like just pushing them around, and then the athleticism, that's who he reminded me of.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, more on this coming up here. We're going to talk through some more Hoosier headlines in segment 1. In segment 2, is Mike Woodson stuck in the 90s? We're going to talk about that. And then we've got a bunch of good mailbag questions. All of that coming this week on Assembly Call Radio. But first, let's talk about our presenting sponsor.
Home field apparel, wear one for the team.
Yes, this edition of Assembly Call Radio, just like all shows on the Back Home Network, presented by our friends at Home Field Apparel, where they have the largest collection of vintage IU apparel that you will find anywhere, with beloved logos like 2 different versions of the Bison, even controversial logos like the oval. They've pretty much got it all. And, the bottom line with Home Field is they have something for everybody. If you are a college sports fan, or even if you just like cool, interesting designs on t-shirts or hoodies or crew necks, Home Field has you covered. And all of their designs are printed on the most comfortable material. The material lasts through many washings. The colors last. It's high quality stuff. And what's also great about Home Field Apparel is you're supporting a great company that employs a bunch of people in Indianapolis, that treats their employees right, that came up through the Kelley School of Business. Just everything about Home Field, the way they do business, the idea behind their business, it's awesome. And we've loved supporting them since even before they were Home Field, back when they were Hoosier Proud is when our relationship with them started. It's one that we're really proud of. And so we highly encourage you to go to homefieldapparel.com. Use that promo code HOME, H-O-M-E. Make sure you've got enough t-shirts for the summer. It's coming. Check out Indiana because they've, added a bunch of new stuff, in the past, 3-4 months. But then they're also refreshing with their other schools. And so if you've got someone else on your list that you're shopping for, go to homefieldapparel.com. You will find something for everybody there. It's promo code HOME for 15% off. Again, the website, homefieldapparel.com. Wear one for the team. Okay. Let's see here.
I have a few details on that game real quick. Let me just update one thing for the Calbert angle, since we talked a lot about Shaq. So in that game, Indiana was the 2 seed, LSU was the 7. And that's why I asked, because I remember them talking like LSU's going to win. They can't stop Shaq. 36 points and 12 rebounds for Shaq, 12 of 12 at the free throw line. But Calbert had 30 and went 9 of 9 from the free throw line.
Didn't Nover have a good game
rebounds.
too?
Nover had 13.
Yeah.
6 of 11 from the field, 2 rebounds. And Henderson had 19 and 6 boards. So they basically
what'd Shaq finish with?
36 and 12.
36, okay.
And 12 of 12 from the free throw line. So,
but
never can.
Hoosiers won, moved on, and would have won the national title were it not for some unfortunate officiating against Duke. Boy, there's a lot of schools that can say that in the Final Four, can't they?
Yeah. Wisconsin to this day. I don't love Wisconsin, but Wisconsin to this day, they should celebrate every year on that day like they won the national title, because quite frankly, they should have.
Man, it's one of the reasons why the whole argument, the whole conversation around the Big Ten's never won a national title. Like, I get it. Like, there's some merit there just about the Big Ten hasn't been bringing as much talent and all that stuff. But I think people forget just how close that Wisconsin team was. And they were probably the best team that year.
They were, and they had arguably the best player in the country performance-wise for Frank Kaminsky. And that second half of that game, go back and watch that. I mean, I was in the upper deck at Lucas Oil for that, actually in attendance. Yes, I had to sit in attendance and watch Duke win a national title. That was the one Kentucky came in undefeated. So I was either going to have to watch Kentucky, Duke, or Wisconsin, or maybe Michigan State. But Michigan State was the lowest ranked team there, and I knew they were going to lose. One of them was going to
Michigan State, definitely the lesser of 4 evils.
The lesser of 4 evils, for sure. So thanks Mom for winning that ticket lottery and making us go and watch Duke fans. But we were sitting in the upper deck with Duke fans, and I at one point was like, "This is absurd!" Like, really loud. You know me, I don't shut up about the officials, and I was just like, "This is absurd." And 2 Duke fans turned around, and I thought they were going to go off me. They're like, "You're right. This is insane." And
they know that's part of the formula.
They do.
That's okay.
And I will say, I think online, I don't like a lot of Duke fans. In person, they were all kind of just got it. They were all kind of like, yeah, it's crap. And I had been texted at halftime. I had a bunch of friends who were covering that because it was in Indy. and a bunch of friends, and one of them texted me, he's like, Wisconsin is not going to get a single call in the second half. And I was like, why? Just because? He's like, no, because I just saw Mike Krzyzewski screaming at the officials before he came out for the second half. He's like, they're not going to get a call. And I turned, and you know, ask my dad this when you see him at the next meetup. I turned to him immediately and said, this is what my friend just said. He's like, oh no. And the whole second half, we just kept looking at each other every single time there was a clear foul, and no, didn't get a call. Sorry. That's the one time I can say, sorry, Wisconsin, you deserve better.
Yeah.
When I'm not talking about the state, the school. I love the state,
right.
The school.
All right, so let's talk a little bit more about, you know, Calbert getting the job. And obviously, look, it's you know, for all of us who grew up with those teams, you know, I mean, Calbert Cheaney is the favorite player of so many Indiana fans. And so it's just
everyone.
I mean, it's really special from that regard. Like, just even if, you know, Calbert hadn't done anything in basketball for the last 25 years and he's coming back, it would be exciting. But, you know, I think there's a lot of reasons, Ryan, why I think this is a really, really good move for Indiana, and, you know, kind of an inspired move based on what the clear plan is for this program. Like, it is really becoming clear that, you know, Indiana is trying to brand itself as a place where, you know, either, you know, young 5-star recruits or transfers can come, get the most out of their ability from a coach who has been in the NBA and knows how to help them get there, and be a launching pad for professional goals, as long as while you're here, you're focused on putting Indiana first.
Yeah.
And that's why a guy like Jalen Hood-Schifino, who's here, gives Indiana everything he's got, you know, delivers one of the more memorable wins over Purdue in, you know, the life of that rivalry, does so many other things, and now he's, you know, going on to the pros. And that is, you know, kind of the template that Indiana wants, whether a guy's going to be here for a year, 2 years, transfer in, whatever. And so you look at a guy like Calbert Cheaney coming in, who now adds to, hey, here's another guy. He was just coaching in the NBA. You know, there's all those videos. You see LeBron James, you know, walking onto the court at the Pacers arena. He sees Calbert Cheaney, gets a big smile on his face. They hug each other. Calbert's out there talking with Damian Lillard. So he's got kind of the contacts and the cachet. And so I think, you know, and just his experience with player development, you know, helping all those Pacers players develop. And we know the impact that he had at Indiana. So, you know, I look at this similarly to how I looked at it when Mike Woodson came, which is, you know, okay, you know, this is, you know, obviously a guy who doesn't have a ton of college coaching experience. How much of an impact is he going to have? But when you kind of looked at what Mike Woodson was going to be able to bring in this new era of college basketball, I think now Calbert Cheaney kind of falls right in with that and helps Indiana continue to build this kind of new program. You know, this, you know, you've got a lot of the old guys who built what Indiana was, who are now here helping build what Indiana is going to be with this new vision. And I think he makes a lot of sense. It's not just bringing an old Indiana player back. He makes a lot of sense based on his experience, you know, and his Rolodex and like all the things that he brings that matter now. I think it can really help Indiana continue to go to the next level. You can talk me down. I mean, I'm going to be more excited about it than anybody, but I do think there are real legitimate reasons to think this is a good hire.
I'll tell you what the most important reason is. And you can talk about player development, all that. I mean, player development guys, how much impact do they have? I mean, it depends on the program. It really does, how involved they are and all that. Sometimes it's just a title to get a guy around the program. And sometimes they actually are severely, you know, seriously involved with it. I think, you know, a lot of times they work heavily with the strength team and all that stuff and get involved. What I'll say about it and why I think it's important has nothing to do with player development. It's because I think that having all-time greats around the program is never a bad thing, especially at a place like Indiana, where the program prides itself so much on the past. I think no matter the program, even if I hate the program, I think it's cool seeing the former players in the stands or on the bench or coming back to be honored or whatever. The connection to how you got there is incredibly important. And especially at a place like Indiana, as I said, you know, we were there in person for one of our meetups, unfortunately for the game, but the day that Bob Knight finally returned. And the coolest thing about that, it was not Bob Knight walking out on the court and acknowledging the crowd. It was how many players were back for Bob Knight walking out onto the floor for that. You know, so it's both things, but how many players were back. I mean, the buzz in town the night before because all those guys were back. We were out at Nick's seeing several of them there. I mean, Keith Smart and Dean Garrett were at the bar hanging out. As I was walking out, I forget who it was, walked in, and that's great, not only for the program, but for Bloomington. I mean, for people like you who grew up watching that team and know all those guys and know the proverbial back of their trading cards, the statistics, what they did, the games, all that. It's important to have those guys around the program, and bringing him in as he's a coach, bringing him in to help, never a bad thing. I think that's an added bonus, but really just having him around the program is a huge, huge deal. And I would say that it's Mike Woodson's program right now. But in a way, it's kind of all of ours a little bit, and all the people who grew up with it. And so having a guy like that around, being able to be interviewed, being able to be there for every game, being able to, just see him working with players and all of that is great for Indiana.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm just so excited. So we'll talk about it more. And obviously, if there are any opportunities to get interviews with any new members of the staff, we will certainly do whatever we can to make that happen as well. But just very, very excited. A good week for Indiana basketball anytime you bring Calbert Cheaney back closer to the program. A couple other headlines, Ryan. Indiana led the Big Ten in attendance this past season for the first time since 2014, which was a little bit surprising.
That is
the
surprising.
First time since then that Indiana's led in attendance. They were 8th in the nation, 16,101 fans per game. Trivia time, Ryan. Which season featured the highest average attendance for Indiana basketball games since Assembly Hall was built?
Oh,
which season?
Has the arena? They haven't expanded the arena. It's always been the same size, right?
I'm pretty sure that the stated capacity or the listed capacity is 17,222. Okay. It's always, as far as I can remember, it's always been somewhere right around there.
I'm gonna say, okay. Well, no, that would narrow it down too much. That'd be too easy. Instinct says like 76, but I'm going to say the Damon Bailey years, like 92.
It was actually the 12-13 season. 17,000, an average of 17,412 for 19 home games. Now, someone, maybe IU Artifacts or someone else who's listening can tell us if, maybe there have been changes in the capacity.
That's the only way that's possible, right?
But, yeah,
I mean,
it was that year. Well, I mean, think about how much enthusiasm there was. I mean, there was as much enthusiasm for that year as there's been for, maybe since
there's
76.
that much enthusiasm. You're right, but what puzzled me would be the students, because even when there's a ton of people don't show up or whatever, but it's also, is that ticket sold or actual attendance? That'd be an interesting.
I think that was actual attendance.
Okay.
But, anyway, if anybody,
that surprises me. I would have thought it was a much older one because
and that was in the official IU release. So
interesting.
Yeah, I was surprised by that as well.
That's awesome. I mean, those great years were on my list, but I was just thinking it would be, no empty seats during some of those championship years, or during, I know there's so much anticipation for Damon coming and all that. Yeah. So those would be my guesses.
Yep.
Interesting.
The Gavitt
Good job,
schedule,
Tom Green.
Yes. The Gavitt game schedule came out. Indiana not playing in that as expected. Indiana already fulfilled its contractual obligations for that event.
How many did they do in that?
I don't know, whatever I think we did.
Three. I mean, did they do the last 3 years? No, I meant the last three.
I think the last three. Okay. So it was expected that we wouldn't be part of it this year.
Okay.
And we are not. And Ryan, Indiana rises to an 8 seed in Joe Lunardi's latest bracketology. So a couple big wins, this week, bumped us up from a 10 seed to an 8 seed. And obviously offseason bracketology is ridiculous. The only reason I bring that up, though, is if you're an 8 seed, that means you're a team basically between 29 and 32.
Yeah.
Do you think that's fair for this Indiana team right now?
Probably. I think Xavier Johnson coming back elevates them, and then I think they've added a lot of talent. I still think, I mean, again, what's going to help them is I really see some teams going down in the Big Ten this year. I mean, like, what's going to happen at Michigan? Like, places like that. If Zach Edey's gone at Purdue, what does Purdue look like? I think fine. I mean, they'll be fine. They'll be consistent, but I mean, are they top 4? That's can you make that argument? Maybe, But if he comes back, obviously they're the favorite, no question. But then, Michigan State's going to be really good. After that, I think it's going to be like this past year. It's just a jumbled mess of everybody's kind of on the same level. And if Indiana, can add maybe a shooter or something else, I think they put themselves firmly in that mix. So if you're in that mix, you're probably, somewhere from 20 to 40 in there if you're in that jumble.
Yeah. Again, I mean, it's such a ridiculous exercise to do.
Of course.
But to me, it does seem relatively fair because we'll get into in segment 2. I mean, I'm so excited about this roster and the talent. Like you can't argue with the fact that this is one of the most talented rosters, certainly one of the most talented rosters since we started the show.
Yeah.
But there are still question marks about how that's going to come together. And a lot of the talent is unproven. So, that does kind of feel fair to me.
It's worth noting too, their recruiting class has jumped to number 9 for 2023 as well. That includes transfers, I believe, though. So Kilo Ware and Baco both helped that. I don't know what their high school recruiting rank is, but their overall rank looks about number 9 in according to 24/7.
Yeah, not bad. Not bad at all. Okay. Well, let's move on here. Coming up on Assembly Call Radio, we are going to use some recent comments by Jeff Goodman as a jumping off point into a broader discussion about Indiana's roster building under Mike Woodson. We'll talk about that next. Stick with us here on the Assembly Call. All right. Hello to everybody who is here with us live. Always great to see you all. By the way, exciting news. Our friends at Doing the Work, Kathy Amos, Jeff Marlowe, interviewed Chloe Moore McNeil today. And so I'm not exactly sure when that is going to be up in feeds, but be on the lookout for that. Did an interview with Chloe, who obviously, has just gotten better every season and steps into an even more prominent role this year, as a ball handler with Grace Berger gone. So be on the lookout for that when that hits feeds. And we also are going to have some exciting news with the email, something that we're doing with email coming out with Tony Adranya. He'll probably be on the show maybe next week or the week after. We'll talk about that, some of the stuff that we're doing, really kind of as another way to give folks who aren't necessarily in our community a way to access some of Tony's film work. So it'll always be there for community members, but we want to give another avenue as well. And so we will talk to y'all about that once it's ready and when we have Tony on here. So, but man, awesome to see everybody here. Always great to be talking Indiana basketball for another week, and especially great to be doing it on a week when Calbert Cheaney returns, which is phenomenal. Right. And as Jen says, am I the only one who is holding judgment until we actually see our team on the floor? Lots of great individual players who had never played together. No, it's a great point. And obviously we all have to kind of hold our judgment, but I will say this as a preface for this next segment. It is much better to have question marks about how 5-star guys are going to do as opposed to question marks about if 3-star guys can outplay their recruiting ranking. Those are much better questions to have. And for a long time, we had the previous type of questions, it felt like, and now we're starting to get more of the latter. And that is good. All right.
Yeah, talent wins in the end, guys.
Yes. Yes, it does. Okay, here we go.
This is Jordan Halls, and I never miss a shot or an episode of the Assembly Call.
All right. Thank you, Jordan. Welcome back to the Assembly Call. I am Jared Morris here with Ryan Phillips. The coach and Andy are off this week. Ryan, one of the questions that we got in our mailbag was from Terry. And he says, I would like to see you delve deeper into the topic Jeff Goodman raised on his podcast this week about if Woody is putting together teams built for the 90s. You have not heard these comments, correct?
I saw everybody reacting to it, but haven't heard the actual comments.
Okay, so I pulled them. I'm going to play them right here. Now, this is just a snippet that they put on social media. I didn't listen to the full conversation between Jeff and Rob. But this is what they put out on social media that everybody responded to. And so let's listen to it now.
My biggest question mark with Indiana is, again, is Mike Woodson coaching and putting together teams like he's coaching in the 90s? That's my biggest worry. Now, again, I'm not saying Renew and Ware are like plotting bigs. They're not. But can they step out and make shots from 3? I'm not convinced of that. I think the spacing might be ugly on the court if you try to play those three together. Defensively, they should be fine. And Xavier Johnson and Galloway have to make shots. And maybe they will. But, again, Xavier Johnson coming back from an injury. Galloway's only done it for a short period of time, and I like them both. But my big thing these days is all about, like, not just accumulating talent. Because, again, the same problem exists for me at Kentucky in a way. Do the pieces fit together? The pieces fit together at UConn last year. They fit together. I don't know if they fit together in Indiana or Kentucky completely.
And obviously there, when he was talking about playing the three together, he meant Mbako, Renew, and Ware together. Yeah. Your instant reaction to those comments?
I would have had no issue with it heading into last year. I can see the argument. I'm not flipping out like, what is he talking about? I mean, I wouldn't say 90s. I would say early 2000s would be the line for me. I think it is set up I think the program is kind of set up like the time Mike Woodson coached in the NBA. I do, and I think that the system is kind of set up that way. You don't have a bunch of guys who can shoot threes on the floor. You don't have a lot of freedom of movement and things. I think you're getting better. I think you're getting more towards it. You don't have a ton of fluid defense where everybody can switch. You started seeing that more with Trace Jackson Davis at the end of the year. Race Thompson obviously helped with that. I do think you're trending more towards that type of program, but I don't see 3-point shooting prioritized the way it needs to be. I think that's getting a little bit better slowly at a kind of glacial pace, but that's what works in basketball these days, is having a bunch of guys who can shoot, who defenses need to respect from the perimeter, who need to switch. That's not the way it was in the 90s. You maybe had one shooter on your roster. Early 2000s, maybe you had two. And it was a lot of isolation, drive, post up, stuff like that. And that's what we've seen from IU's offense so far. Now they're saying, we want to change that. We want to change the offense. We know what we want. We want it to be different. We get your frustrations. Let's see it. I'm not saying they're lying, but I will believe it when I see it, because I think Mike Woodson is coaching what he knows. He knows defense, and he knows that kind of ISO post-up offense. So, and that's not unique to Mike Woodson. Coaches rarely dramatically change what they do from one job to the next. Mike D'Antoni knows his teams never played defense. Did he ever work to change that? No. He played a very high-scoring offensive team that never played defense. Won a lot of regular season games that way and always disappointed in the playoffs. It's just an example. A lot of coaches are that way. John Calipari has run the same offense his entire time as a college head coach. Even if it doesn't work with his personnel, he will run the same offense, that dribble drive motion, all of that. I just think that coaches do what they do and hopefully build the perfect team to their system and don't really change that much. I would love it if Mike Woodson was a little more, wound up changing the offense, prized three-pointers more, prized an open floor offense, a spread floor offense. I'll believe it when I see it. And it's not a knock on Mike Woodson. I think he's doing what he knows best.
Yeah, my first thought is, look, if we're going to go 90s, let's go all the way. Calbert's back. Let him use his COVID year. He can take that open two-guard spot and still go out there and get double digits, even now as a 51-year-old. So that's my first thought. No, when I heard those comments, I didn't really, I think Jeff did a relatively good job of expressing what some of the question marks are about this team. Now, I think the one thing that he left out, and I don't know if this was talked about in the rest of the podcast because I didn't have a chance to listen to it, and I think even you left it out a little bit there when you were talking. I do think that this staff has prioritized and tried to get more three-point shooting and more dynamic wing players. They just haven't been successful yet at landing them.
And that's true.
Yeah, and the guys that they've landed, you get a chance with Kel'el Ware, you're going to take him. And they needed someone at that spot. And the nice thing with Ware is
honestly, he is more of a
modern big man. Right. And so, Jeff says, hey, I don't know if Renew and Ware are going to be able to step out and hit threes. The evidence isn't great for either one, but Ware, hit threes in high school. He wasn't terrible as a freshman. If you're going to tell me a big man hit, 29% of his threes on decent volume as a freshman, it's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of us
And
still have
of
confidence
course,
in
you project that
CJ
to get a
Gunn
little
as a
better,
shooter,
yeah.
and he shot 8%.
Yeah.
So, you got to take a freshman 3-point shooting with a grain of salt, and I'm actually
course.
encouraged by what we saw from Ware. Same thing. So you get Mbako. In a perfect world, you probably slot Mbako in as a 4. But you also had a chance to get Malik Renew, a 5-star big man. You're not going to turn that away.
Yes.
So there is a little bit of, you've got to get the best players.
Yes.
If you're going to tell me, okay, we can get lesser players, but put them into, this perfect system,
Better
I'd still
spots.
rather have the better players.
I would agree. And you look at Renew too. I mean, there's more towards that. I mean, because Renew basically plays like Trace Jackson Davis. I mean, that's essentially, he's a lefty post only guy. He can step out. He can handle the ball a little. He's aggressive, all that. And he can step out a little. We saw him, trying shooting more. And I think that will be part of his game moving forward. But he's also a 5-star from Montverde. And you're trying to recruit all of Montverde's roster pretty much. I mean, there are ulterior motives to taking certain players at certain times too. And you have a chance to get a Montverde guy and build a pipeline. You take it regardless of how you want to play, and you build your team around it, and so there's taking Renew was a no-brainer. Going after him, I mean, it was a no-brainer. And taking
all three of those guys,
absolutely.
You're going to take them and you're going to play them. So.
Of course, absolutely. I have no problem with the players they've taken. I do think they need to hit more on some of these multi-use guys who can play inside out, who can, shoot and drive, create points from the wing. I mean, that's what I said. I pounded the table for weeks about getting a wing scorer. They got Mbako. It's just a question of what he can do as a freshman, and how much can he do? How much does his 3-point shooting improve from what he shot like 29% in his senior year, or in the EYBL, I think he shot like 20-something%. If he can move that to a 33%, now we're talking.
I would take that right now.
You
got to lock in
it.
33% from him.
You got to respect the 33% shooter. But I think that what needs to happen, and not every team has this, but the goal of basketball teams now is to have at least 4 guys on the floor who can shoot shots, who can hit shots from the outside. Not at 40%, but also not at 18%. Just
be credible. Be credible.
Be a threat. And be able to at some point hit 3 of 5 or something in a game, so they have to respect you.
Basically, the difference between Trey Galloway as a sophomore and Trey Galloway as a junior.
Yes.
As a junior, you had to respect him. As a sophomore, at the end of the year,
people played
just
10
weren't
minutes, 10 feet off of him. Yeah. And so that's the goal of basketball now. And again, you can thank the Warriors for that. I mean, really, 3-point shooting was becoming a thing, like more of a thing in professional basketball heading into when the Warriors and Steve Kerr changed the game. And now it's everywhere. It's sort of like Bill Walsh and the West Coast offense. Everybody started running that. And then the spread infected the NFL. Everybody runs a version of it now. The game changes whether you like it or not, and you have to change with it. And if you don't change with it, you do get left behind. And Archie Miller, for example, got left behind. What worked in the what worked in 2010 did not work when Archie was Indiana's coach. And there were plenty of reasons why it didn't work, but part of it was the style was outdated. The offense was completely outdated. And Mike Woodson, I think his offense has been better than that, certainly. Yeah. But it's not as big a step as Indiana needed to take to modernize things. Again, he's had 2 years. Maybe the third year things kick into that again. I'm not saying it's impossible. Mike Woodson's a very smart guy. He knows basketball. It shouldn't take too much to show him, hey, we need more of this and less of this if we're going to win. And that's the big question mark. Do they take that? Now, again, you're right about getting the players. You got to get the players to fit that system. And so hopefully, again, they start hitting on some more of these guys.
Yeah, and that's why I think those are all fair questions for this season. I just think the jury is still out for Goodman's comment on Woody being, building like it's in the 90s.
Again, going into last year, I would have agreed. Going to this year, I think it's a little different. I think there's much more versatility on the roster.
Yeah, and and you look at some of the guys they brought in. They brought in a CJ Gunn, they brought in a Ja'Kai Newton, which are players that should be able to go play on the wing that Indiana hasn't had. They're just guys who are going to take a little while to develop. They missed on a whole bunch of guys in the transfer portal. They wanted Nick Timberlake. They wanted Dalton Connect. They wanted some of these guys, who would be able to do some of that. And if you look at the hot board in 2024 and 2025, there's Flory Badunga on there and Derek Queen on there, but almost all of the other guys are multi-talented wings who can shoot, pass, a lot of 3-level scores. So I think the jury is still out. The one interesting thing to me, and we talked about it a lot last season, kind of a chicken egg thing, right? It's like, all right, Mike Woodson is now going to be in his 3rd year. You can't sell hope. You can't sell kind of a vision totally. You have to also sell what actually happened. And as we said last year, this wasn't necessarily an offense that really featured, perimeter shooters, especially, Miller Kopp, guys like that who maybe, aren't great at getting their own shot, need the offense to open it up for them. And so, that's kind of a question. If you're a guy like that and you look at Indiana's offense, well, how much is there for me to do? But a lot of the guys they're going after are more the Jalen Hood-Schifino types and the Mackenzie Mbako types who are, kind of multi-skilled guys who can go get their own shot and get it out of the offense. And if you stack 3 or 4 of those guys in an offense, you're going to be pretty good. So I say all of that to say I think there are, and we're going to spend a lot of the offseason talking about the questions of this team. I think it's perfectly fair to be very excited about the talent and really excited about the ceiling of this team, but also have questions about how so many unproven guys who haven't played together, how it's all actually going to work on the court. That all seems fair. So I think for the most part, Goodman articulated that fairly well there. And then I just think it's a wait and see on, kind of the roster building. Because I just, for whatever reason, it just feels like we won't really find that out until we see what happens in 24 and 25. And a lot of effort has kind of been pushing toward that. This was kind of the bridge year. And really, I think they did a phenomenal job of filling the roster with talent in a bridge year, to help make sure that there's not a big drop off from last year. So I don't have a whole lot of issues with what they've done. I still have questions about what it'll look like going forward. But, all things considered, we're in a much, much, much better spot than we were a couple of years ago. And now we'll just see, how much higher Mike Woodson can take it.
Yeah. I mean, look, I don't the spirit of the comments I maybe don't love, but I really don't think it's anything to get upset about. It's a guy's opinion about what he's seen from Indiana before, and he's not totally wrong. Again, I would have said early 2000s, not 2000s, not 90s, but that's really my only gripe with it.
Yeah.
And I think there's potential for him to be wrong, but we have to see it. We have to see it.
Yep. All right. Let's keep going here on Assembly Call Radio. We've got a bunch of other good questions in our mailbag, so let's get to that segment now so we can get through as many of those questions as possible. Stick with us here on Assembly Call Radio. All right. And congrats to Jeff's daughter, Talia.
Yeah.
Who is going to be an intern for Peegs this year.
And look, Jeff has, before his daughter came to campus, he really loved picking at IU fans. He's been pretty positive on IU since she got there. He's seeing it from a different perspective. I used to find him exceptionally annoying. He would say a lot of things that were true, but we don't want to hear them, because we're aware, Jeff, thanks. That kind of thing. He was really down on the Mike Woodson hire, and I wasn't as down on it as he was, but some of his points were valid at the time. Certainly some of his concerns about it were valid. But I would say I think he's softened a lot on Indiana because I think he sort of sees the community and sees why the fans are so rabid and all of that. But so I don't take, I think now, I think he's making these comments because he kind of deep down wants Indiana to be good, so his daughter can have a good experience.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with Jeff. I think there are some national media members who, and look, I don't even mind if you point out the flaws in Indiana. I mean, this program has been in the wilderness, and there's all kinds of issues.
Kind of earned it,
Point them out, but there's a certain level of
twisting the knife. Yeah.
No. What I want to say is there's a certain level of respect and appreciation that you at least want to know is underlying the comments for a program like Indiana. Like, that's why I always thought Mark and Tate were so good, because they could see and highlight the absurdity of college basketball and point out everything that was wrong, but you knew beneath it all they love what it is and all the unique things about each program and fan base.
And I
think there are certain national writers out there who now love to get off on just, kind of picking on Indiana. And the irony is they've been more wrong about Indiana than anybody else.
I will say
but
this.
I don't think Jeff is in that category.
No, I don't either. Let me say this too. Indiana's fan base, our lovely listeners, are the reason they do that, because we react to things that people say we're very defensive about our program and our school. And it's an aspect of our fan base I love, but they know they can rile you up by saying certain things, and they will keep going to that well as long as you continue to get riled up. Again, come in here and get riled up. We'll let you do that. But if a national podcast starts twisting the knife on Indiana, there's one reason, and it's because they know you will come at them with
I've tried to be much more disciplined. Coach chewed me out once, and I've tried to be much more disciplined about not responding to that stuff when it happens.
If you do that, you're kind of I love you, but you're kind of a sucker, because that's what they want.
Yeah,
that is what they want. They want the attention. They want the.
Yeah, you know what it is?
I'm
you
in
know
the traffic business. I get this, folks.
I know. And you know what it is? I mean, obviously Gary Parrish is, kind of enemy number one for Indiana fans right now, because he just likes to troll Indiana. And I think for me, when I realized that he's been wrong about Indiana more than anybody else, calling the Archie Miller hire a home run, wondering if we paid $10 million to get worse. Once I realized that, I was like, why even pay attention to it at all?
Yeah.
And then just stop paying attention to it.
And he was a big Crean. He's friends with Tom Crean, a big fan of his. And I think that
personally, he's actually a really nice guy. All of my personal interactions with Gary have been great.
He's incredibly nice.
When I'm behind the Assembly Call Twitter account, it gets me riled up.
As somebody who works in the sports media business, and I've had people who some of you are in there now, have met me in person and will say, "Man, you're way nicer than I thought you'd be." When you're doing this, you do have a bit of a persona, because your job, when I write or whatever, it's not that I don't believe what I'm saying, but you jack it up a little bit, because your job is entertainment. Your job is entertainment. And so to some degree, and it's not even intentional, sometimes you just become a version of yourself that's maybe a little more dialed up or dialed back or whatever, because you're for entertainment. So these people away that, people run into people and they'll be like, "Oh, he didn't talk shit to me in person." Sorry, swearing, but he didn't talk crap to me in person. It's like, well, yeah, because he's not that guy. Like, it's a version of himself, and he's going to say things, and you're saying things for entertainment purposes. We are here to entertain you, not, tell you about our lives, and so I do think that is a part of it. And some people are as authentic as you'll ever meet. Coach is the most authentic person you'll meet on or off ever. But I think that that certain people in this ecosystem are a persona.
Actually, both Coach and Andy.
Yeah, Andy too. Andy is too. Although, no, you know what? No, I'm going to disagree with that, because I've gotten texts with Andy about
that's true.
Program.
That's true. That's true. And I've sat next to Andy at a game.
Yeah,
that is true. And looked over at him like, who the hell is this guy? Okay, you're right.
Yeah, normal everyday Andy is like,
but Andy
Indiana
at a sporting
fan,
event.
Yeah, Indiana fan Andy, different guy. Different guy.
That is true. That is true.
Ryan's being stupid again.
No. Okay. All right, you ready to hop in and answer some mailbag questions? Yeah.
Oh yeah, I muted myself, but yeah.
Here we go.
What's up, y'all? It's Devontae Green, giving you the green light to watch Assembly Call after every IU game. Just don't listen to their opinions about shot selection. Remember, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Go Hoosiers.
All righty, thank you, Devontae. I'm Jared Morris here with Ryan Phillips, and we are talking Indiana basketball here on Calbert Cheaney Week. A very triumphant week for Indiana fans everywhere, as Calbert is back with the program. Things are going well. Indiana building a talented roster, so we are all very excited here. And Ryan, we got a bunch of good questions, so let's power through as many of these as we can get to. All of these questions this week submitted via our private IU basketball discussion community, which you can learn more about at assemblycall.com/community. And we hope you join us in there. I mean, it's the off season, but there are still 4, 5, 6 conversations going on in there every day. We're going to have a lot more analysis coming from Tony Adrania with IU Film Room. So it's a good time to join. And so we hope that you will join us over there, assemblycall.com/community. Ryan, here's the first question from Andrew. Who has the highest NBA/pro ceiling on the team? He says probably a debate between Mbako and Ware. I would say that's fair.
I would say Ware because of his athleticism. I mean, if he can really be that size and play inside out, yes. Who do I think realizes their potential, is more likely to realize their potential? Mbako. But Ware's just, I mean, he's a unicorn. He's 7'1", can handle the ball, play on the perimeter. I mean, if he can hit threes and drive from the perimeter, I mean, you're looking at a Kevin Durant type guy. Now, does he become Kevin Durant? Come on, he's one of the top 10 players of all time, probably. Well, top 10 scorers of all time, probably. So no, but the potential is there for him to be just one of those unicorn guys who's that big and can do everything on the floor. Does he reach it? It's going to take a long time. It especially takes. It's harder for big guys to reach their potential.
Yep.
Because the athleticism issues that come in, injuries, all that.
Yeah.
But and they face more of that. But I would say he's number one on the list, certainly. And again, it's two questions: who has the highest ceiling, and who is more likely to reach the highest ceiling. I think those are different answers.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think Ware definitely has the highest ceiling. I mean, if he realizes it and becomes everything he can be, that's an all-NBA player, honestly.
Yes.
Like, as big as he is, if he can shoot. I'm not saying he's going to get there, but that's his ceiling. And I think, Mbako probably has that ceiling too, but it's a little bit easier for him to get, to become kind of another wing in the NBA. Like, there's a lot of guys who do that. It's, obviously a very important. I mean, all NBA teams need, 2 or 3 guys like Mbako who have that kind of size, who can score in multiple ways. So I agree with you. I mean, I think there's a pretty clear path, to Mbako just being a solid NBA player for a long time. But he's also got star potential if he reaches it. But you can't teach 7'1" and that kind of touch and everything that Ware has. So I think he's got the highest ceiling.
And I said Luol Deng is my Mbako thing. Guy who can play on the perimeter, has some size, not the best athlete in the world, but a guy who can do some things. Luol Deng was a really good NBA player before injuries derailed it. So I think that, and then there's obviously a ceiling for him to go higher than that. But that's kind of what he reminds me of, a guy who can do a little bit of everything from the perimeter, play a little inside, and make some shots.
Yep. Good question, Andrew. Next up, this is from our buddy Chris at IU Artifacts. How do you rank Calbert's return to the IU program in terms of all of the offseason storylines?
Jared, you're going to put this at number 1. I know. No, I would put it.
Number 2,
I would put it.
Number 3.
I would put it behind the players who committed. I've said it's if he was coming as the head coach or something, that's a huge deal. But player development, I mean, it's nice to have him on campus. It's a nice story. I don't think it's a vitally important story for how the team is going to play or anything like that. But I would say that number 1 is Mbako. Number 2 is probably Ware, and then Calbert probably number 3. Xavier Johnson coming back and Calbert are probably right together for me.
Yeah, and really it kind of depends on the time frame that you're talking about. If you're just looking at impact on this season, obviously it's the players. I think if you're looking more macro, now you can start to make a little bit more of an argument for Calbert. But I agree with you. I mean, a director of player development coming in right now is only going to have so much impact on the season coming up. But I think he can have an enormous impact on the program down the road, just building a culture and, again, having something else to sell to recruits. There's a lot of reasons to like that, but I'm with you. The greatest thing to be able to sell to recruits is, hey, Mackenzie Mbako decommitted from Duke and came here over Kansas, and Khalil Ware, a 5-star who's maybe a lottery pick, also came here.
Yep.
You're not going to get anything bigger than that. So
and the long-term impact on the program of being able to say back-to-back years we got 5-star recruits. We also added a 5-star transfer. That's a big deal.
Yep. And also, I will say just the lack of any bad offseason storylines is nice. I think it was around this time last year.
That might be the top story.
Yeah, it really might be. Because this was around the time when X had his issues last year. And so fortunately, none of that, and hopefully there's none to come. Phil says, did Jordan Hulls encourage Woodson to pursue Calbert, as Calbert was with the team when Jordy was a player? One thing I do love about Indiana fans is how much credit Jordan Hulls is given for things that he may or may not have had any impact on.
Jordan probably picked up his phone. He's like, oh, Calbert's coming? Cool.
No, it's just great. Like Trey Galloway's doing better, and it's, oh, wow, he must have really worked with Jordan Hulls, in the offseason to fix his shot. And look, I mean, I love Jordan, and I think Jordan's had a huge impact on the program. I think in this case, I'm sure, Jordan was, consulted and talked to because he was there when Calbert was talking. But, as far as I know, this was as far as I know, this was a discussion between Scott Dolson and Mike Woodson. I believe, I don't know if the NCAA this year recently expanded how many coaches you can have.
Yes.
Now, on court, because Calvert's going to be able to work on the court with them. It's not a recruiting position. And they looked at it, and he was the number one choice. And, they were able to get him, which is, another good recruiting victory for Indiana. So I don't know what impact Jordan had, but I do know that Jordan is having a big impact just on the program overall. And just, that's the thing. We don't know exactly everything Jordan does. We don't know exactly everything Calbert's going to do. We don't know everything that Cliff Marshall does, and all, Ya and Kenya and, Walsh and all these guys. But what we do know is that the more good people with the right mindset that you can stack up, it's just going to create a better culture for Indiana basketball. And I mean, in my time watching Indiana basketball, if I had to pick the top 10 culture guys, Calbert and Jordan Hulls would be in that list.
They're up there, yeah.
There's no question about it. And so having them as part of the program, and all the winning that they experience, it's only going to help. All right, Jerry, what happens to the people in the transfer portal who don't find a new home? I assume they are not welcome back at their current schools, or are they just out of school, including basketball?
Some return to the previous schools if there's room. Some go to a lower division, and some...
What's their scholarship situation? Like, when you go in the transfer portal, your scholarship at your current school is done, right? Isn't that the case?
I don't know exactly when it's terminated, if you still are connected or if they release you from it, or at what point they release you from it, because some guys go in the transfer portal and return. A lot of guys go in the transfer portal and return. So I don't know when it's officially cut off.
But the team would have to, would the team have to take you back, or can you just say, I'm coming back?
No, I don't think they have to take you back. So I don't know if that's just an agreement to come back. Like, if once you go in the transfer portal, the team is allowed to replace you. They don't have to wait for you to leave to replace you, but maybe it's just an agreement to come back, if there's an open spot. But as far as I know, they just become students. Now, I don't know how it works, because a lot of times, so guys can go to a college on a scholarship, decide to stop playing and keep their scholarship. They sign aid papers, keep their scholarship, and proceed as a student. And the team will get that scholarship back, but the school is paying a scholarship for them. There are agreements like that. Also, medical retirements. If guys retire for medical reasons, they sign paperwork. They can be a full scholarship student, and it's the same scholarship as basketball player, but the basketball team gets the scholarship back if they medically retire. Some guys have medically retired and then gone back to play at another school. But so I don't know the exact mechanisms there in place, but typically, if you're in the transfer portal, your team's going to, if you're at a good program, they're going to replace you, and as fast as they can. They're not expecting you to return. But, Indiana has a situation where a bunch of their guys went in the transfer portal when Mike Woodson took the job, and they brought, I think, all of them except for Armand Franklin came back. So, I mean, that's, that happens. But again, I think it depends on the situation. But there are guys who are going to go into the transfer portal and not find spots. And
then they just don't have a scholarship. And so,
and I don't know how that works, if they can go back to their original school and just be students, or I do not know. That's something that I have not seen written about.
I don't know. If anybody listening knows the answer to that,
please reach out. I'm not sure the exact machinery of how that works, because honestly, we don't talk about those kids, the ones who missed out on the transfer portal, or who were sold on probably behind the scenes. Hey, come here. And they decommit, they're ready to go. And then somebody else, transfers and takes their spot at that new school. So, and then somebody transfers in to take their spot at the old school, and they're left in limbo. I do not know the answer to that, but I would assume they just go and finish college.
From Rick, what shooters are left in the portal that might be a fit, or maybe grad transfers? And I saw Keegan in the chat said same thing. When are we going to get that guard that'll complete our puzzle?
I don't
Here,
know. If
I want to know what your answer is to this, but I want to plug the recent episode of Ball from Assembly Hall with Christian Watford and Derek Elston, who almost were going to be on this show tonight. We're going to get them on an episode one of these times, either Assembly Call Radio or we'll do a separate one with them if we can't get them on at night. But I thought their discussion about the current roster was really good. And I think Christian Watford's comments on Trey Galloway are something all IU fans should listen to. I should have pulled it. Basically, in a nutshell, what Christian said was, it doesn't matter what Indiana does, you're not getting Trey Galloway out of the starting lineup. He's done too much. The coaches respect him too much. His game has improved too much. And you're not going to get him out of the starting lineup. Now, whether that's true or not, I think there's a situation where the right guy comes along and Trey can, move into more of a sixth man role. Either way, it's all about the total minutes that you play, not whether you're starting. But I thought Christian's comments were a very forceful reminder to Indiana fans who, reasonably and fairly are kind of looking at how can we improve this roster. Don't overlook the fact that guy is a really, really good basketball player who has gotten better every season and may well come back better this year. So I just, if you're looking to get a little bit more excited about what Trey Galloway can bring next year, listen to Christian Watford, because I don't think, outside of our own coach, Jeff Marlowe, I don't think there's a bigger Trey Galloway fan than Christian Watford.
And
that
think
said,
about defense too.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Indiana's backcourt does have some offensive challenges. How many teams are going to want to go against Xavier Johnson and Trey Galloway in the backcourt? No. You are not going to have an easy possession against those two guys, So what are your thoughts on that? Are you hearing any names? Are there any names out there that you're interested in? Obviously Cam Spencer is still out there, Ray J. Dennis, like all these names that we've heard, but there's nothing I've heard ties any of them to Indiana in any way that makes me pay close attention.
I've heard Ray J. Dennis is a no for Indiana. I don't know which end that's coming from, whether it's him or the program or both, but I've heard he's a no. Cam Spencer fits what they need. I don't know where he's going to end up. And I don't know.
I don't think he's coming to Indiana either.
Yeah, I don't think so either. But I don't know. I can't definitively say no. I haven't heard no on him, but it doesn't seem like that's what he's looking for. So yeah, I don't know. There's not a whole lot of guys left that are Indiana level players, and shooting goes fast. And we talked about it, weeks ago. And before Mbako decommitted from Duke, we talked about wing scorers, and they were running out. And they were lucky that the Mbako situation unfolded the way it did, because they were without a wing scorer. And, Coach and I were kind of having a back and forth about whether to take Ledlam. And I was like, well, who else are you going to get? Like, there's not a whole lot of guys out there. They went all in on a couple guys and they went elsewhere. And other than where they, the guys they went in on hard, Connect, and, these other guys went elsewhere. And so when you miss out, you leave a gap, and they've missed out on guys in recruiting and in the transfer portal. And so I don't know if there's an Indiana level shooter left, or if they're just going to hope that CJ Gunn and Trey Galloway continues to shoot the way he did and can shoot at a higher volume, and that CJ Gunn comes around and that Xavier Johnson shoots more like he did his first year at Indiana than his second. And and that Mbako shoots better than, shoots in the 30s, essentially. I don't know if that and where can hit some more shots. Like they may be banking on that at this point and leave the scholarship open. I tend to think getting a 1-year transfer will be better than leaving that open. But if there's not an Indiana level player, don't waste a scholarship.
Yeah, it's got to be the right guy.
Yeah,
got to be the right guy.
Agreed.
At this point. Yeah, as far as all the guys that we currently know about in the portal, there's no one that I'm like tracking closely. And maybe we'll get some news that'll change that. The other news that could change that, and this is another question from Phil, what players will withdraw their names from the NBA draft, and which ones would be worth offering the final scholarship to?
No idea.
There's talk of a guy like Julian Phillips from Tennessee, who a lot of people think is going to come back. I think now that Indiana has Mbako, I don't think they're going to be involved with Phillips, because those are two guys who play similar positions. He's not a 2. Is there anybody from an NBA draft perspective that may come back and want to transfer that you're paying attention to?
I don't know. I think a lot of these kids are going to stay in this year. I just think that there's a wide open gap after about the 20th pick, where if you're barely a second rounder, a team could really like your upside. I think there's a lot of upside guys in that mix, and I think they'd rather play professionally than, even if you're a G League guy, you play professionally, make some money. And I know the NIL money is there, but if they're already jumping to the draft, I think that they, are looking for more than the NIL money. So I don't know. There's not a whole list of guys that I think, because most of those guys are going to return to their other school. I mean, they're not going to wind up in the transfer portal. So, I think that a lot of the guys who drop out will just go back to school.
And so I just think, and I know it's hard because we've spent like 5-6 weeks just like hanging on every piece of news, and then who's the next name? Well, we've got 12. We've got a good enough roster to go into the season with. Doesn't mean it couldn't be better, and that we all wouldn't love to add something. But this is still a good roster as it is right now. The way that I'm approaching it now is I'm essentially not even paying attention to transfer portal recruiting stuff anymore until we hear serious news about like, hey, this guy's coming on a visit or there's real interest here. I just don't think, as far as I've heard, that there's anybody even close enough to be that interested in. Maybe that'll change, and if it does, we'll obviously start paying attention and have an emergency podcast if someone commits. But, I do still get the sense that the staff would like to fill a scholarship, for depth and to, just add another piece. But it's going to have to be the right piece.
Yeah.
All right, 3 more questions. And the last question says this question is specifically for Ryan.
Okay.
So leave that hanging there as a tease so that everybody comes back and listens. But 2 other questions to get to before that. From Matt. I'm curious to hear what you guys think about CJ Gunn's struggle shooting the ball last season. Did anyone see anything mechanically? Do you feel like it was a lack of confidence? My understanding is that coming out of high school, he was known as a really good shooter with decent size. Do you anticipate a return to form as a sophomore? It would seem to me that CJ has a great opportunity to step in to some increased minutes at the 2 if he can shoot consistently.
Yes, if he can shoot, he'll get more minutes. I think that's pretty obvious. We saw his defensive aggressiveness and stuff like that was what got him minutes this year. It certainly wasn't his shooting or his offense. I think he just rushed everything. Mechanically, it doesn't look like anything's specifically wrong. I just think he's hurrying because he was a freshman, came in, and then when you miss shots,
so many freshmen do.
It's very common. It's very common, and because your adrenaline is very high because you're in there for short bursts, and you're like, I got to do something in this game.
Remember Armand Franklin as a freshman?
Yeah,
it was very similar.
And you're facing bigger, longer, more athletic guys, so you feel like you don't have the time you had in high school, which is true. But instead of compensating for that by making things more compact, you just rush it. And I think that's what it was. I really do. And then I also think to some degree, he comes in known as a shooter, starts rushing things, and then it gets in your head that you're missing and you got to make. And I think that's the worst. If you're thinking as a shooter, you're missing. Whether it's the free throw line or the 3-point line or whatever, if you are thinking, you are missing that shot. Mailer Kopp went through that his first year at Indiana. He thought a lot because, again, he came in to be the shooter, started missing some, and was inconsistent the whole year because he was overthinking it. This year, from what I understand, he went and worked on the mental side of things coming in, and he was much more consistent and just calm out there and was a huge part of that team. Numbers wise, he won't get a lot of credit, but he was a huge part of that team.
Yeah, now he's like Cupfucius on Twitter, just like dropping knowledge every day.
His thread on the Big Ten was fantastic.
It was great. Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff on there.
Or college basketball in general, yeah.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say about CJ is, to me, the most important thing about his freshman season is not the percentage. Like, I don't pay as much attention to freshman shooting percentage. Look at the attempts. Do they keep shooting? Because that's the sign of a shooter. And CJ kept shooting, which means that he continued to believe in his shot. Even if he was kind of struggling, to make them, he still believed he should take them. And the coaching staff did too. And that's why, as we've mentioned over times, Ryan, I went, and looked at this because it's so strange to take that many attempts and have that low of a percentage. But, in the last 20 years of college basketball, there's a short list of guys who have done that, while also playing the number of minutes that CJ did. A portion of those guys never played college basketball again for whatever reason. But of the guys who came back and played, almost all of them came back and shot 35+% from 3 the following season because The fact that they kept taking the shots showed that they were trusted and they were shooters. And once things slowed down and they got a bigger sample size and got comfortable, they started making them. So I'm going to be, I'll be really surprised if CJ, isn't shooting at least in the low 30s this season, and occasionally giving you one of those, Tamar Bates type games where it's like, wow, CJ had 18 against Michigan State, but hopefully a little bit more consistent, obviously, than Tamar was. But I think CJ has that kind of potential. He hit, 9 threes in a game in high school?
Yeah.
He can get hot and fill it up quick, which is, something Indiana's going to need. And so he'll be inconsistent, as a sophomore, but I think you'll see that percentage go up. And I haven't seen anything to be concerned about his shooting yet. Now, if it doesn't come along this season, then you got to be concerned. From Ken. With this year's team, will we more likely employ a deeper rotation, which will reduce player burnout? An unrelated question is, do you think that Bill Self's heart attack influenced Mbako's decision?
Part 2, no. I don't think that had anything to do with it. And from all accounts, Bill Self is fine. And will be fine moving forward. A heart attack isn't what it was 40 years ago, health, long-term prognosis wise.
Not just a shot doctor, an actual doctor.
Well, I have family members who've had them, and we'll want this team to play deeper. We're going to ask for it as we did last year, but you don't want guys playing 40 minutes a game. You just don't. It's a different. I know Woody says he did it, but it's a different game, man. The game is more up tempo. It's faster. It's insanely physical as well in the Big Ten. You don't want guys playing 40 minutes a game. If it's a tight game against Purdue in February, yeah, you get your best players, but you don't want them regularly playing more than 35 minutes. You don't. And
yeah, I don't see it this year.
I don't
last
either.
year you saw it
with Trace.
There were extenuating circumstances last year.
Injuries
Trace was so good, and everything was built around him, and same with Jalen.
Yeah.
Once X went out, you can't take Jalen out of the game, really. So
but I will say we've seen a pattern from Woodson that he does not care about usage. He really doesn't. And he played in the NBA for a long time, and he expects guys in college to play like they're in the NBA as far as physically. And that's probably my biggest issue with Woodson is he expects these kids to play like 30-year-old NBA guys because, hey, he's only 22. They're not as developed as NBA guys because NBA guys can spend 4 hours a day in the gym if they want. These guys are reduced to how much they can work out. They've got class. They got all these other things. The NBA guys dedicate their whole lives to just playing basketball. And there's a reason LeBron James spends $1 million a year on his body. You can't expect every college player to perform like that, minutes wise. And so I do hear this a lot from Indiana fans who say like, well, he's only 22. He can play 40 minutes. It should be fine. Like when I was 22, I could run for an hour and a half. Yeah. Did you have guys hanging off of you and hitting you and then playing every position on defense and switching and, all that stuff? It's just different. And the way Indiana plays defense, especially getting after it on that end, they don't relax. And so guys don't get possessions off. And in the NBA, you can take whole quarters off if you want. So yeah, I just think that we need to be realistic about what these kids can take physically. And you saw it the last couple of years. Indiana's guys got tired at the end of the season. And that's not just Mike Woodson. Other teams that happens to too. But you have to be realistic. You recruit all these guys. Recruit guys you're willing to give minutes to. If you bring a guy in, you should be willing to give him minutes. Even if it's Caleb Banks getting 6 minutes to steal you some minutes, at the end of early in the second half or something. You've got to be able to steal minutes where you can.
Yeah, this is also something I'm going to be interested to see this season, if this is different. And I feel like there's some reasons that it will be. You don't have Trace, and so I think there's a little bit more of a big man rotation where you can kind of play based on some matchups. And, obviously some of these guys are foul prone as well. X is the guy who profiles to probably get as many minutes as he can handle.
I would say that too.
Now, a lot of that depends on Gabe Cupps. If Gabe Cupps is ready, as much as the staff, I think, thinks he's ready, he may be able to ease some of that burden. But I think X is going to play as much as he can. I think, a guy like Mbako, who can really slide theoretically from the 2 to the 4, if he's ready as a freshman, he's going to get a lot of minutes because you can mix and match lineups around him. And then, that's the nice thing with Renew and Ware and Walker and Sparks. I think you are going to be able to keep those guys fresh. I really do think there are going to be some Peyton Sparks games. where he comes in and plays 15, 20 minutes, ends up as the, third or fourth leading scorer and is a big reason why Indiana won. And there will be other games where he'll play 3 minutes and it just won't be his type of game. And same thing with Anthony Walker. I think there will be some games where just from a defensive perspective, you're going to want him out there more. And then there'll be other games where, Indiana just has such a dominant matchup down low that Renew's just able to go nuts. So I love the mixing and matching. But the other thing I feel like you have this year, Ryan, is young guys that the staff has really invested in their development. CJ Gunn, Caleb Banks, and they're really, to me, now they both have the potential to take big leaps as sophomores and, who knows, potentially be starters. But they're also guys who you could look at as maybe the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th men. But if they're like the 9th or 10th guys on the bench, I still think you're going to see them getting minutes because I think the staff has invested in their development. And, they're guys who really profile as important pieces down the road. And that, I think, is maybe a little bit different than what we've had in the past. So to answer to answer Ken's question, I do think we'll see it, especially early, and then I'll be really curious to see kind of what happens in Big Ten play. But I do think we'll see a little bit more of it, certainly, than we did last year. All right, last question. Kyle, this question is specifically for Ryan, he says. A wealthy IU donor has passed away and is leaving $100 million to support IU athletics. You were given 3 options on how you want to use that money, and you can't split it up. You have to give all $100 million to one option. Which option do you choose and why? Option A, set up an endowment that will be used to fund NIL collective efforts. Option B, create a players-only dorm that will be named after the donor. Or option C, upgrade athletic facilities and rename them after the donor.
So I'm taking B out right now. I don't think they need a players-only dorm. The players all, I think, live in the same development to start anyway. An endowment that will be used for NIL collective efforts is a good option. Upgrading athletic facilities and renaming them after the donor is also a good option. If it's $100 million, I am going to go with the collective because I think the university should come up with the money through other means for an arena. Like a donation is great, but I think it should be a collective donation. I don't think it should be one person. The collective you can use to make your football team better as well. That would create more revenue, which could then be used to help build better facilities. Because the football team, as long as it's non-competitive, which it's been for most of the last, 20-something years, you're not going to be excelling as an athletic department, and it's going to cut into any revenue chances you have. Basketball just doesn't make as much revenue as football. If you're good, sponsorship opportunities will be better. The gate for football will be better, all of that stuff. And I think you can use that collective money to bring in players and create, if you're just doing it from a basketball side, I think you have to spread that around to football too. But if you're doing it from a basketball side, you bring in the best players, you then have success, which I think brings donors. And so I think that it will be a self-fulfilling prophecy because people will take pride in the program, love following the program, want to be involved, and they'll be involved with small donors and big donors. So I do think that getting the players is the most important thing. I do think it helps to get those players if you have better facilities, which Indiana does need to work on, but I think they could raise that money holistically through having good programs. And I think that the NIL money will help with those programs.
I think I agree with you.
Yeah.
Are you worried at all about the risk of NIL type rules changing and then?
Well, that's not that you can't
that.
factor that into this. Okay. I mean, because there's a million permutations here that,
and surely you could just
then you could be like, well, would an arena cost
yeah.
more than $100 million? So why would you do it? Okay. I mean, there's permutations there, but I would say the NIL is because if you make the teams better and you make the programs better, the money's going to come. I feel like that is certainly true.
I agree with you.
Yeah,
I agree. Good answer. Any final thoughts, Ryan, before we close up shop for the evening?
Welcome back, Calbert.
That's right. That is right. Welcome back, Calbert. Man, such an exciting week. All right, that is going to have to do it for us on this week's edition of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. Thank you to Bob Thompson for producing our music. Thank you to John Ringer of rigdesign.com for designing our logos. And as always, thank you for listening. We'll be back to talk IU basketball again with you next Thursday. Until then.
Take it from me, Thomas Bryant. Keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim. Go Hoosiers.
Indiana basketball is the shit.
Yep.
Guess I'm not the only one who swore this week.
Thomas Bryant, still playing.
Well, Vic, hey, the Heat win. Vic will get a ring.
Yeah, well, are the Celtics gonna do this?
No.
Okay.
I think the Heat win Game 6 pretty handily too.
Even if Vincent's out too, they don't have.
Yeah,
I
think Jimmy Butler goes robo mode and destroys them. And by the way, if the Heat make the finals, they're the only team left that can beat the Nuggets. They match up very well with the Nuggets. I think Jimmy Butler.
No one's beating the Nuggets unless you have OG there to try and slow down Jamal Murray.
Well, I think that's what Jimmy's going to do, and Jimmy's just going to muscle him around. It's going to be all on Jokic, and Jokic can win games by himself at this point too. But it's going to be on their role players. I think like Porter's going to have to hit a bunch of threes, whatever. At Miami, they just have the mentality to beat them too. And Butler on Murray is Jamal Murray is not going to play better than Jimmy Butler. It's all on you. And the question, I mean, Adebayo can't beat Jokic. Nobody can beat Jokic. You can't guard. The only way to beat Jokic is a 2x4 to the knee. That's Jokic the only way you're beating Jokic. Man. Yeah, yes. He's one of the.
He's unbelievable.
This stretch he's had is, and I know there's too much hyperbole in sports, but the last 4 years is one of the greatest stretches in NBA history statistically.
Yes.
I mean, it's
not even arguable.
Not even arguable.
Amazing.
But he plays in Denver, so nobody talks about him. I mean, the basketball people talk about him, but the general public doesn't know him. He's doing better in some of Michael Jordan's years, best years.
Different game statistically,
totally, and it's hard to compare them.
Yes.
But I mean, we don't, and he's not a topic of conversation. People are talking more about whether LeBron will retire.
Well, he doesn't want to be. See, LeBron wants to be, so he threw that out there.
Well,
and
LeBron
Jokic is perfectly fine, just flying under the radar.
And I'll say that he is. And I'll say this about LeBron. When he's in the news a lot, people go God, I'm sick of LeBron. He didn't ask for that from the beginning. He was a very good player, and that was thrust upon him very early in high school, and he just accepted it and has continued to be the face of the league. And just
absolutely knows how to leverage and maximize it.
He does.
He's the most media savvy athlete. I mean, he's had some missteps, but
he was media savvy as a 20-year-old.
Yes.
And I'll say this about LeBron. Somebody posted this, people hate LeBron. There is a faction of people who hate LeBron because they hate people who are just in the news forever. It's the Tom Brady, Peyton Manning thing. It's just when you're that good for that long, people just hate you because you're good. And it's true. But LeBron has been a model citizen since the beginning and has never had a misstep. And the people who hate him, I get hating him from a basketball perspective, but you cannot hate the person. You really cannot hate the person.
I don't even get hating him from a basketball perspective. I get being annoyed by him.
Annoyed is a better word. But I mean, rooting against him, disliking him. But if you root against the person, LeBron, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, he has been as model citizen as you could possibly ask for.
He has. And I find myself relating with him a lot now as a dad.
Yep.
Not because, my son's going to play in the NBA, but just hearing him answer. He had this great answer, they were asking him about that. If he's still going to do that. And he's like, yeah, that's my goal. He's like, well, I don't know if it's Bronny's,
Yeah.
And I just want, I want to support my kids and do what they want to do. And so it's just,
the fact that
I like seeing that other side of him. And I actually think it's a great thing that he's so out front, being a dad and how
he's open about a lot of stuff.
I think it's a great example.
He's not one of these guys who hides, his feelings a lot and everything. He's media savvy. You're right. But if he's pissed off, he'll say it, and he'll express frustration and he'll talk about his family, about being a dad. He even said behind the scenes, I don't know if he ever said this publicly, but going back to Cleveland, he said was for me. That I wanted to go back there and prove something because I left those people. He said, and the reason he went to Miami, he said, was to win championships, obviously. But he also said, I never went to college. I never got out. And he said, that was me going to college, and getting my few years away from and seeing something different and being with different people. And when he went back to Cleveland, he could have stayed in Miami forever. They would have had him. or he could have gone to LA or the Knicks or whatever. He wanted to go back to Cleveland. He said, that was for me. Going to LA was for my family because they had a house out there and they all loved it out there. And that was where they stayed a lot of time. And they went there. His kids wanted to go to school there. They wanted to live out there. And so they went to LA. Now it worked out for him in a basketball sense too, because they won a championship and all of that stuff. But the fact that he's open about that kind of is like, I did my thing. Now it's time for me to do what they want to do. He could have gone back to Miami. He from Cleveland. He could. I don't think he could have left Cleveland for Miami again. Actually, never. But I mean, anywhere.
That would have been ridiculous.
He was happiest, and I think that's admirable. Yeah, it's for the Lakers. I mean, a pretty amazing franchise to play for. But if you look at LeBron, he's not the greatest Laker of all time. He took that on to go play for a franchise where he's not going to finish as being the greatest Laker. He's the greatest Cleveland Cavalier of all time. You can make an argument that while he was there, he was the greatest player to ever play for the Heat. I think Dwayne Wade gets the title now because he was there forever. But he went somewhere knowing I'm probably going to be like 5th on the list of greatest Lakers as far as your career goes all time. And he's fine with it. I mean, he was overshadowed by Kobe when Kobe was retired and LeBron was playing. And that's why Kobe didn't go to games, because LeBron are close and he didn't want to overshadow him. He went to a handful of games, but he would stay away. And yeah, so I do think LeBron is, if he retires as, in my opinion, he's not the greatest player of all time, but he has had the greatest career of all time. And I don't think it's really an argument. Yes. And he lived up to and far surpassed every single expectation.
That context is a big part of why.
He was 16 years old. He's not a guy who came out of nowhere and became a superstar. People heaped a lot of things on him, and he lived up to and surpassed every single mark they set for him.
Yeah, I think maybe we should do this as a show sometime. I think the best player ever is Michael Jordan. If I have one game to win, I want Michael Jordan on my team. The best NBA career of all time is LeBron, and the best basketball career of all time is Lou Alcindor.
Yeah, I would agree with all three of those. Yeah. And honestly, if I had a game to win, now my answer to win is still Jordan. No, my answer now is still Jordan. But all time, if I had a game to win and I needed a performance, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar might get that. I mean, or Bill Russell, it would be a consideration.
Bill Russell would be the other guy, but I would take. I mean, it would depend on the context of the game.
Of course, yeah. So I mean, it's hard to do. But if you're just talking,
if you're saying a basketball game, I don't know anything else.
But if you're saying in their era, it's probably Jordan. Yeah. But people, it's always funny when people say "Oh, Jordan wouldn't have lost this playoff series." Jordan lost a couple playoff series before the Bulls went on their run. I mean,
yeah, but once he reached that point,
he learned from them. Yeah, no, he learned from them and got better. But the point is, they didn't lose those series because of Jordan. It's about the guys around you too. And for 6 seasons, he had the best team in the NBA, maybe bar one season in there. The Bulls were the best team in the NBA every year. LeBron's Cleveland Cavaliers team that he took to a title was probably not even top 7. Without him. Without him, they missed the playoffs. Well, without Jordan, those Bulls teams are contending for the Eastern Conference Finals. So I do think that context is important when you talk, he's 6-0 in finals, and he has those 6 rings, and we all know he's the greatest basketball player, of all time.
Bob Knight, I think said that in 1984 before he even played in the NBA.
And he was right. And people thought he was crazy. And he was right. They thought he was crazy for other reasons as well. But no, I do think that you have to look at context. And Jordan, and also, by the way, some of those teams were so loaded because Jordan was there and people wanted to play with him. I mean, that, it was, and the roster management was great on top of that and all that. And a lot of those guys were great and then went off and went somewhere else and played pretty well. Steve Kerr would be a great example of that. But yeah, I do think that's worth examining context. The Lakers were probably the year LeBron won with the Lakers. They were probably, for much of the season, probably the 4th best team. Injuries happened and things like that. They picked up some good pickups and then they kind of were. But I mean, it's worth examining that context. When LeBron was with the Heat, they should have won those titles. I mean, they absolutely, there's no excuse for them not winning those titles. But I would say the same about Jordan, except for maybe 1 year with the Bulls. They should have won all those titles. And so it is interesting to put it in that context. Now,
you got to give guys time, though. A lot of guys don't win till they're, mid to late 20s.
Of course,
you need time for Scotty to come around.
Oh no. What I'm saying is the years they won, just the years they won.
Oh yeah, the years they won.
Yes, that's so they did what.
And
they
you
were
always
supposed
believed
to
they were going to win because you couldn't fathom. I mean,
them
there have been two athletes, I guess, and I'm not old enough for Ali and some of these other guys. Gosh, maybe three, but there's been two athletes where you just believed with every fiber in your being that they would win, and that's Tiger and Michael.
Oh, I got one more. I got one more.
Tom Brady kind of got in there to a certain extent, but not at the level of those guys.
Got another one. Michael Phelps.
Oh yeah. Oh well, yes. If you start getting into other sports, then for sure. Yeah.
But I mean, that's
King.
that level though. It's those three guys. You're right.
Yeah.
It's those three guys. You never expected them to lose, and when they did, even if it wasn't their best event or it wasn't, you're shocked, absolutely shocked. And but yeah, I mean, those are the guys. I mean, who else? You're right. Tom Brady, I think that mystique went away a little bit as he got older. And part of it was because his team sucked. I mean, the teams around him in New England were not great for a long time.
Yeah. But if you put him in a playoff situation down,
I never bet against
banking on him.
Would never bet against him. Even at the end, I would never bet against him.
See, and it's funny because like Aaron Rodgers is clearly a more talented football player than Tom Brady. And yet you don't get that sense with Aaron Rodgers. Like when he got in some of those tough games, he would, kind of fall flat, and he's an amazing player. I mean, it's incredible when an athlete reaches that level, and obviously there's only been a few of them who have ever done it. So, all right. Well, thank you for listening to Sports Talk here on the Assembly Call. Always fun to do. All right, Ryan. Oh, last question for you. NBA Finals, Heat, Nuggets. If the Heat, don't blow this against the Celtics and make Bill Simmons forever unlistenable. Cody Zeller goes up against Thomas Bryant. Who you got? One-on-one matchup in the post.
One-on-one matchup in the post. Ooh, I think Cody's savvy would edge him slightly, I'll say.
You think so?
Yeah, give him a little of that veteran savvy, that old guy energy.
He does. Gosh, that makes me feel old. Cody.
They ran some ISOs for Cody that were fantastic in the last series. I was loving it.
Oh yeah, Simone Biles.
Yeah, Simone Biles is one. I mean, Katie Ledecky. You could get into the weeds. I'm talking about the three biggest that were for multiple years, and Michael Phelps was dominant for what, 10 years.
4 Olympics, right? Didn't he do 4 Olympics?
4. I think he did 4, and he was dominant at 3 of them. So no, he did 5 Olympics because he had one event. He had one event in Sydney, and they dominated Athens, dominated Beijing, obviously. He dominated London, but it was a disappointment because he didn't do as well. And then Rio, he dominated.
You've reached a level when
you get 5 gold medals, and it's
but it wasn't good enough. Yeah.
Guys.
All right, Ryan. Thanks for being here, man. Always good talking to you. And we will see you all soon. Take care, everybody.